Welcome to the History Help channel. Today we will be looking into the historiography section. This video is about church historiography. So, our earlier lessons were about Greek and Roman historiography. This lesson is about church historiography. So, under what is church historiography? Church historiography is medieval historiography. So, the ancient period, there was only Greek and Roman historiography, but medieval historiography was dominated by church historiography and Arab historiography. So, under church historiography, church became very important. So, church was at the center of all things. So monks, clergy in Europe, they are monks, clergy, priests, everybody wrote about Christianity. And they spoke about God, divine will. They spoke about how God, everything was happening according to a divine will, how the God was responsible for everything. So all those kind of thoughts began to be written. So coming to the growth. So how did it actually begin? So Christianity, church historiography began 3 centuries after Christianity rose. So though Christianity began in Palestine, it emerged until it was in the Palestine. This one, it had no much importance. But soon Christianity entered Greek and Roman world, and Roman emperors tried to suppress the religion of Christianity, but it didn't work out. So finally, Emperor Constantine realized that this religion cannot be suppressed anymore, and so in 313 AD, he declared Christianity as a religion. So, with the rise of Christianity, the church historiography did not come about. Only 3 centuries after the rise of Christianity, church things about church was started being written. So I told you, Christianity was given importance in 313 AD by Constantine. Before that, there was no recognition. So, who wrote about Christianity? It was monks, priests in Europe, and because Christianity became more important, so decisions that church took, people who had sacrificed their life, people stories about missionaries, all this had to be written, and that's how traditions had to be recorded, preserved. So all this was the work of monks and clergies. They started writing about church, and that's how church historiography began. So, what are the features of church historiography? One thing about church historiography is it is all about church and religion. They are all sacred writings, okay, of Jesus, of Bible, of the monks, of the priest, of the church, and all that work done. It's not secular, so it is not based on political affairs. Neither was it based on reason like Greeks. Neither was history considered as philosophy. Neither was it about political history like the Romans. Church historiography was all based on faith. So the timeline what they had was very incorrect. So the monks and the priests who wrote about history, uh, uh, they just divided history into different time period and they wrote. They accepted the rumors and traditions. There was no source check or there was no timeline consideration. So this was one of the features of this historiography. And everything was religious history. Everything was like God and man. God was behind everything. So one of the early important features of church historiography is annals and chronicles. So annals were they were annals means annual information. So it was about recording the information that has happened in a year. Chronicles was all about events that took place. Both of these did not refer to any past or any sources. They just wrote about the events happening. So monasteries or seminaries used to write all these annals and chronicles, and some of the we'll talk about annals and chronicles later. So everything that was in church historiography was theological. So everything was like theological in the sense everything was centered to God. So it was working of providence, what you say, or God or divine will. So that was called as theological or theocentric. Theo means God. So it was all theological. So who are the early church historians? One of them is Eusebius, who was from the 260 to 340 AD. So there is a picture of him on the right. He served under Emperor Constantine. He was known as the father of church historiography. So he was born actually in near Palestine, um, and he had seen the struggles that church had done under Roman emperors. So Christianity was getting suppressed. So he had seen all of that. He had traveled widely. He also, where the place where he was located was in Palestine. There was a very good Christian library which he was able to refer. So he got quite a good bit of information for his sources, and so he wrote many books. One of them is Chronographia, which talks about chronology of all the of all ancient systems like Egyptian, Biblical, Greeks, everything he has written the chronology of all these. Another book which he has written is Historia, which is nothing but it's the history of the church from the beginning to 309 AD. So that is also a very good work of him. What he had done was he had used a collection of documents and he had tried to write this book. He's also written a book on life of Constantine because he had served under Constantine, so he wrote about the life of Constantine also. So these were because of all these works, basically chronography and historia. He was called as the father of church historiography. The next important person, or the very important person, is Saint Augustine. There is a picture of him on the right. He lived from the period 354 to 430 AD. So he was a preacher, a poet, a teacher, a philosopher, and he was born in a place called Numidia, which is there in the modern Algeria. Okay. He studied in the University of Carthage, and he was converted to Christianity, and he taught grammar, and finally he was appointed as the bishop at Hippo. Okay, so he has written many, two of his important works are City of God and Confessions. So when he was there, Christianity had become a strong religion. So he has written a book on that, and Empire was declining and Christianity was becoming strong. So whatever principles which Saint Augustine preached, influenced the theology, the philosophy, the economic and political principles during that time. So what did he write about? We will cover in the next slide. So his principles basically affected everything: theology, philosophy, economics, everything. So let us see his first book was City of God. So what was City of God about? City of God is one of his greatest books. He has talked about two kingdoms here. One is state, which is man-made, and so he says it is evil. The other is the city of God, and that is which is very perfect. So he talks about two kingdoms. In the city of man, everything is evil. No, it is imperfect, whereas the city of God is very perfect. He says the church is the reflection of this city of God on earth. So whatever church says would actually be divine will or whatever God says. So he's brought in the church, importance of church. He says, "City of God, whichever God has created, is full of law and order, whereas this is state made by man is very evil. There is no law, there is no order there." Then he talks about the state which man has made is temporary, but the city of God is permanent. So the ultimate goal of humans is they have to be united with God, following the principles of church. So you can see from this statement, he has given the importance to church and its principles. So until then, in the Greek and the Roman period, the state was very important. The individual was a part of the state. But in the case of church historiography, church became more important than the state. So this was the political theory in the Middle Ages. So in the medieval period, church became more important. So everything was like the state had to obey the laws of the church. That was the kind of theory that came about. So subordination of the state to the church. So he says, in the city of God, there is always a struggle between good and evil, but God is there in the center, and everything. Whenever there is evil, finally, overall goal is to be with the God. So this kind of history is also known as sacred history or providential history. The 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 theory which keeps God at the center is known as the sacred history or providential history. He has also written another book called Confessions. This was as I said, he had converted to Christianity. So before embracing Christianity, he talks about how there were temptations in his life and how Christianity saved him. So it's more about talking about him being a Christian. He talks about also seven periods in history. Other church historiographers. So there was Gregory of Tours, Venerable Bede, and from 5th century onwards, 800 years, church has dominated the medieval ages. So politically, church became much stronger. So talking about other church historiographers, there was Gregory of Tours. He wrote a book on the history of the King of France. Then Venerable Bede, he wrote a book on Historia, which talks about he's known as the father of English history. He's written about the history of the English nation, and it is written in Latin. Then as mentioned earlier, annals are nothing but authentic information about the about annually year. So some of the important annals and chronicles were monasteries were basically were used responsible for annals and chronicles. Some of the important annals and chronicles were Annals of English History and Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. So the questions that will be asked in this lesson is bring out the contributions of church historiography and outline the contributions of St Augustine to growth of historiography. So in the next slide, we will be learning about Arab historiography, which is also a medieval historiography. Thank you.